Hi, my name is Micia Mosely, and I'm the founder and director of the Black Teacher Project. We're joined today by Averill Kelley, who is a social studies teacher in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's also on the board of Teaching Tolerance. We are really excited for you to be here, Averill. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
Of course, of course. So tell us what's happening in your context, in your school context, in your larger community. What's going on right now?
So like you said, I do teach in Las Vegas, which is the fifth largest district in the nation. We have over 325,000 kids. Roughly, just to give you an idea how big we really are, we have 52 high schools. So we're a huge district. We're urban, suburban, and rural all at the same time, just to kind of context what kind of a dynamic we're working with within Clark County. So with just being involved in a big school district, and it was something that I always wanted to do when I started teaching, was to work in a big school district and specifically work with at-risk kids. I can remember being an undergrad at the University of Nevada and writing that down and always staying loyal to that. So within this big district, I teach at a school called Charles I. West, or West Prep, and it is a K-12 school serving students in the historic Las Vegas, west side of Las Vegas. And so we have kindergarten all the way through high school. Kids can stay in the school from when they start and 13 years later and graduate, or they can come and go as they please. So it just depends on kind of what their relationship is to community and to the school.
Got it. Now, when you say West Las Vegas, for those of us who go to Vegas, if I never make it to the West Side, what are some of the things that define that side of town?
So the good thing about the West Side is the historically Black area of the Las Vegas Valley.
Got it.
So what would happen is a lot of the Black people, when they moved here to Las Vegas, they weren't allowed in certain areas. So they started to build up the West Side. And then when a lot of the performers would come, Black performers that would come to Las Vegas, they were allowed to perform on the Strip, but they couldn't stay in the Strip hotels. So they would come over to the West Side. So you have this hotel that was built and it's since closed down due to a fire, but the Moulin Rouge is a really big Black owned hotel in West Side of Las Vegas. But now they're doing a lot to really, I hate to say this, but they're gentrifying the neighborhood. And it's a gradual process of what they're doing. So I can't really tell if they're trying to move people out of the neighborhood or just try to build the neighborhood up so it's better. But that's pretty much the historic West Side Las Vegas.
Got it. Yeah, I think for many of us, I'll speak for myself, I wouldn't necessarily think of Black people in Las Vegas.
Oh.
Right? I think of casinos. I think of the Strip. I don't think a lot about the communities of folks that live there, right? Yeah. But I know a lot of Black folks who moved to the area. So if I, put my mind on it, it would make sense. So
come and visit.
Yeah, not in the summer though. I'm gonna need y'all to.
No.
So tell us a little bit about, obviously we're in this context of COVID-19 and really supporting people to be well. So I'm curious as to what are you doing for yourself? How are you taking care of yourself?
So I am a full-time teacher and I'm a full-time doctoral student at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, studying multicultural education. So my days have always been super busy from teaching. I'm at an 8-hour school day. So I teach 8 hours and then may have a 3-hour class afterwards, depending on it. So for me, part of this has just been a way for me to just relax. I'm kind of overdoing, I'm overextending myself school-wise and in the classroom. And sometimes I didn't feel like I was being the most effective teacher that I could be to my students, even though I know it probably was going above and beyond, but just to actually be effective. So that was the one thing. And for me, it's given me a time to reflect. A lot of what my degree focuses on is your identity. And so I've been able to reflect about my upbringing, different decisions that were made, how my family ended up in Las Vegas, why I ended up staying in Las Vegas, starting to question a lot of my background and doing through a lot of my studies, right? So I took a class this semester on urban education. And it really started to click to me wow, there is really a big difference between the way we educate urban students versus non-urban students, something that I really hadn't thought about and deeply before. And I would always just roll off my tongue oh, Clark County is an urban, suburban, and rural school district, not to think that the kids in inner city Clark County have a lot more to deal with than our suburban students. And so that was that's what this whole 10 weeks I've had over to just really process a lot of the stuff I'm learning, a lot of stuff I'm going through, thinking about my own upbringing, thinking about if I was my students and I was raised in a single parent household, Black family, living in Connecticut in a very low income neighborhood. And I was talking with my brothers on the phone, and I was all like, just imagine if this had happened 20 years ago, right? When we were growing up, and how would we have survived during a global pandemic outbreak that we're having right now? So for me, it's just been a time for me just to calm down and relax and just kind of go out for a walk sometimes, or just reflect, get some rest. And even kind of with my students, I kind of told my students, like, it's gonna be okay. Don't freak out. Your grades are gonna be okay. Like, I just want you to just relax and stay at home and try to figure this whole thing out. Watch the news. A lot of it wasn't about like them and their grades and what they need. Like, to me, I always thought that was secondary right now. Right now, we're just trying to figure out, like, we're all experiencing a global pandemic. We may not be experiencing it the same way, but we're all experiencing some type of this outbreak. And so I'd rather have them focus on their families, getting things together. And then when it was time for school, we can get back to the school.
Right. Well, I mean, you answered my next question, which is, what are you doing for your students? And I think it's so important that we remember, we talk about educating the whole child, but first we have to acknowledge the whole child.
Exactly.
And they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, the benefit of being a social studies teacher is that, your curriculum's right there. Like you said,
actually, so my saying the whole time has always been coronavirus is an example of civic education. So as a civics teacher, one who loves government, I just sat back and I was like, you know what? This is a time for our students to learn about local government, state government, federal government, policies that have been implemented, how bills are passed, how stimulus packages work, how the economy works, how this is a science lesson, how this is a math lesson. So to me, I honestly have to be, I did not care about the curriculum I was required to teach. I really wanted my students to really understand what was going on and how they're living history right now.
Yep. It's important. It's so important. So, I feel like even that stance is a little bit of what we think about when we talk about this idea of rebel leadership tonight that we've been exploring. And, one of the reasons why we wanted to interview you is we knew that, as a leader, both in the classroom, but also being on the board of Teaching Tolerance, which is, an organization that touches so many folks, that leading in different contexts calls for different types of leadership. And as a Black teacher, when you think of this idea of rebel leadership, what does Black teacher rebel leadership mean to you?
So when I first got this question, I actually had to go look up the definition of the word rebel, only just to make sure I understand, like, we're all talking the same language, right? So, and I think for me, Black rebel leadership is kind of what I've been doing literally probably the most part of my career. And that is being able to listen, to observe, question, and then come up with some type of a solution to fix that problem, right? So, like, for example, I'm a We the People teacher. I love We the People. I think it's a great program. There are some issues with the program around how the curriculum is set up and what ideas are pushed more than other ideas. But in general, the way the program is, it's a great program. What we were noticing here in Southern Nevada is that the same schools continued to win. And it was the same schools that had affluent, wealthy, white students who could really spend more time in engaging in civics and talking with their parents and collaborating with others than my own students can. Most of the time, my students, it's coming to school and then they have a job or some type of career. They have to help out. Doesn't mean you lower the expectations. Just means you have to work around the expectation a little bit. So what me and another colleague ended up doing was kind of advocating for a different way to recognize different groups for their hard work, the different teachers and students. And the first year we did that, we went from recognizing 9 schools at the award ceremony to recognizing 19 out of the 21 schools that showed up. So everybody got an award for some type of, whether it was their unit did really well or their overall group score was very well, but it was a way to change the way we are acknowledging students for their hard work. And so that, to me, it's always about, like, when I think about rebel leadership, it's always about thinking about what's going on, like listening, thinking, and then trying to come up with a possible solution to help fix that problem. And so, and sometimes I think as me as being a Black educator, I've gotten pushed back because, like, whoa, like, that may be too radical, or that may be too much, or maybe you're not on the game, you're not on board with what everybody's doing, right? How they like to say those. But we're all a family. Like, we're not a family. Right? We're just a group of educators.
The cookout. So that's how you get to invite to the family reunion.
Right? Like, we're a group of educators who have a passionate goal of helping kids succeed. And so that was kind of one time where I was really kind of a rebel. We've had different school-specific programs where, so I'll never forget this. My first, I was at a turnaround school, and the principal, they wanted to implement like this new literacy strategy. But the problem was it was just too late. The strategy came as the kids were in the fourth quarter of their senior year. And so I kind of pushed back to it a little bit, and then ended up having good like administration, but I was able to justify it. It says like, this is a great strategy, but it's definitely not something I think we could use right now as kids are getting ready to graduate. Right. So I did push back on that. And that was the first time in my career when I actually pushed back on something. And I actually had like, I went all the way up to my school principal where he had to plan a meeting with me to come talk to him about the situation and how I felt. And he did listen to my voice, which I thought was pretty exciting. He was listening, and then he basically had his opinion, like either you're gonna do it or not. But that's what happened with that. And then the other thing I'm doing is, because I'm so passionate around civics ed and teaching tolerance, I was able to get a grant from Teaching Tolerance, working with the social studies person for the state of Nevada for the Department of Education. And we're gonna create a civic academy specifically for Black students, Black and Latinx students, and Southern Nevada to learn about civics. So they gain the knowledge and the experience so they can be engaged citizens.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, just as we were talking about using the context of COVID-19, you know, as these could be civics lessons, science lessons, I think it's so important for us to recognize beyond this moment, what are the skills that we're gonna need to engage differently, and understanding civics, understanding how we relate to one another. I mean, obviously I'm biased as a social studies teacher. I'm like, yes, civics all the time. But thinking about that particular population and how Black people and Latinx folks have been pitted against one another. This idea around documentation and having papers. All of us have a long history with that in different ways. How we begin to understand that history and interrupt those cycles of inequity is important. I'm not sure that people always make the connections, right? So I wanna get a sense from you. What do you think is important for Black teachers to know, or for Black teachers to remember right now, like as we're in this moment?
I think something that I struggle with all the time is that you're capable and you can do it. And you don't have to sit up to anybody's expectation of what you're doing, right? That you know your students in your room and you know what works best for them and for you, so that you're capable, despite all the negative connotation that may be out there about us, that you can achieve, that you know how to best serve your students, that you can go out and reach those access opportunity points to help them. And I think the other thing is just to continue to be innovative, right? To continue to be able to think about issues that are going on in your classroom or going on in your school, and to try to provide ideas and solutions. Don't sit back and just think somebody else is gonna do it for you. You actually have to be that voice. That's the one thing I would highly encourage, is just speaking up and sharing your opinion, your view. It may not be the opinion that they go with, but at least you're able to get it out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So important for folks to remember. You know, our ancestors fought hard so that we would have a voice. So it's up to us to use it. So you've clearly been using your voice in all kinds of ways. How can people stay connected to you and to your work?
So like I said, I'm a graduate student. So right now I'm working on grad school, but you can follow me on Twitter at Averill_Kelley. That's kind of the main way I professionally promote myself. Or you can send me an email and I can send you my email. It's averill.kelley@gmail.com. And we can continue the conversation, working on and trying to figure out ways to help students, specifically our Black students.
Great. And I will also just note, obviously your work with Teaching Tolerance is another great way that folks can, it's a wonderful.
Yes.
And, you know, but I think it's important to know, sometimes with these larger organizations, people don't think that there are Black people behind the scenes. So, just really excited to have you at the table and know that you're up to some important work. So thank you so much again for taking the time to talk to us, and thank you for all the work that you do.
No problem. Thank you.
Appreciate it.